So good morning, everyone. See a lot of familiar faces, a lot of new faces as well. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Camille. I've been working here as a beekeeper at Chenard's for about the last 5 years. I learned mainly under the tutelage of commercial beekeeper Fred Selby. That's where all of your packages and nucleus hives come from. Um, and I've been doing quite a bit of learning just by reading and by experience as well. I'm almost to the point where I'm a real beekeeper. Once you're at 6 years, you're no longer a newbie. So getting into beekeeping. This is a bit of a chunky class, so I'll try not to bore anybody. We're going to go over just a brief benefits of beekeeping, what you can expect in return for all of your backbreaking work. Brief history of beekeeping, and this will make you a lot more comfortable with keeping your hives today. Bees are incredibly adaptable. Why bees are in trouble and how you can help, when and how to begin, hive composition, placement, and terminology. And this is going to be a good chunk of the class. When you're getting into beekeeping, it can be absolutely daunting hearing all these different names. A lot of them mean the exact same thing. So we're just going to make you feel a little bit more comfortable with that. And I've separated frames out just to make things simple. We'll be talking about woodenware and frames in two separate categories here. Beekeeping tools and apparel, what you absolutely need, and some fun toys too. Basic social organization of bees. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time on this, but it's really important that you at least know the basics and you can begin. Going to go over bee breeds and what you can expect as far as how they're going to act, their gentleness, that sort of thing, and how you procure packaged bees, nukes, and swarms. And we'll go over some additional resources, particularly paper resources. So benefits of beekeeping. Most of you are probably concerned with either pollination or honey, but there are several benefits that you can get from being a beekeeper as well. The wax has a lot of different uses. It is difficult to render. So if you want to get into this, be sure that you absolutely want to. It takes a ton of wax to do anything, but it can be quite the fun hobby if you have several hives going. Propolis is something not a lot of people who aren't beekeepers actually know about, but it has a lot of interesting benefits. It's antiviral, antibacterial, antifungal, anti-inflammatory, antihistamine. It's basically useful for a variety of different things. So you can make tinctures, ointments, chews. You can collect it and use it to glue pieces of your hive back together. They call it bee glue. Aromatherapy, sting therapy. And honestly, the best thing about beekeeping is you will never be bored ever again in your life. There is an unlimited amount of knowledge to be gained. So we'll go into a brief history of beekeeping, how bees and humans have gotten along in the last whole lot of years. So in the early years, humans began as robbers of bee nests. So they would take honey, they'd take brood, wax, they would use it as food, drink, medicine, even currency. So the creation of mead actually predates the creation of beer. So that gives you a little bit of knowledge on just how long humans and bees have been interacting. Earliest records of human interactions with bees date to 8 to 6,000 BC in certain rock paintings. I think they were actually a little bit earlier than that, but this is just what we found. We have Spain and Zimbabwe. This is kind of interesting because the bottom photo here shows a depiction of actually the use of smoke to calm the bees during the collection. Oops, sorry. The earliest domestication of bees is going to be 970 to 930 BC. This is in Tel Rahab, Israel, where they found around 75 to 200 cylindrical hives made of sun-dried mud. Kind of hard to tell because after a while, that many years, the sun-dried mud sort of melds into the rest of the environment here. But it's a testament to how adaptable the bees can be. You can put them in a mud jar and they'll still be fine. When bee husbandry really began, hives were built using whatever was around and whatever was cheap. So people used gums, which basically, if you found a bee tree out in the wild, you'd cut that bee tree out, take it back to your village, set it up, and the bees will probably abscond, but the following years, new swarms will continue to go to that nice hollowed out log. So you've effectively made a hive by just cutting it out of a tree at that point. Sun-dried mud, fired clay, reed baskets insulated with mud, dung, whatever is on hand. And these days you see most of your hives built out of wood. Although plastic is becoming more and more popular. I've seen a couple of polystyrene as well. Maybe a few of you have these. They're also pretty interesting as far as insulation. So throughout the centuries, bees have been used for direct resource collection, which is mainly what we think of, pollination, and kind of cool warfare as well. So rhododendron honey along the Black Sea, there's not a whole lot else blooming other than rhododendrons. So the concentration of rhodi nectar in the honey becomes so great that it actually becomes poison. We've got a lot of rhodies around here, not anywhere close to Black Sea levels. I'm not worried about it. We've never had any cases of mad honey in this area. But around the Black Sea, it can get to the point where it can subdue entire armies. Skep booby traps during the Castle Age. They have little nooks in all of their castle walls. So if an invading army were to come in, they break through the gate, which would trigger all of the honeybee hives to be spilled out. Nobody really wants to fight when there's hundreds of thousands of angry bees going around. So extremely adaptable, and humans have used bees for lots of different reasons. So the grandfather of modern beekeeping, Reverend L.L. Langstroth, patented his movable hive with regards to bee space, which we'll get into later, in 1852. He's not the first person to come up with this. He's just the one that patented it. And I think he did a really good job on his designs here. It's the most widely used configuration today. So 1852, we're in 2025 now. It's a pretty solid design. So where honeybees are found today, you can find them out in nature. If you find them in live trees, they won't really be in dead trees. They rely on a symbiotic relationship between bee and tree. If you see them on the undersides of trees with the comb exposed, up here in Oregon, there's not a whole lot of chance that they're actually going to survive there. So if you see something like that, just consider them freebies, go and collect them, put them in a hive. You'll have a chance of actually saving them, but they can't survive our winters exposed like this. You'll find bees most commonly in the backyard around here. Backyard beekeepers generally have 2 hives to start, and then some beekeepers have as many as 12 or 20 hives. Once you get into the hundreds, you're considered a sideline. Once you get into the thousands, you're really considered a commercial beekeeper at that point. But in the backyard, your hives are pretty close to each other. They're low to the ground. They have quite a bit of maintenance going for them. But the backyarders tend to take better care of them than the commercial guys because you've just got a handful of hives versus hundreds of thousands or however many the commercial guys have in their apiary. Commercial operations are extremely crowded. They use forklifts, heavy machinery. Hives are palletized and smashed in really close proximity. So they have intense management. There's a lot of medication that needs to be happening. There's a lot of feeding that needs to be happening. But the commercial beekeepers are the reason you backyard beekeepers can exist. All of the nukes and packages come from the leftovers from their apiaries, what they are able to spare. So why bees are in trouble? We kind of saw this just a minute ago. The nature of their foraging habits make them extremely susceptible to disease and parasites. Honeybee workers will tend to drift from colony to colony if they're in close proximity, like you saw back here, or even in your backyard scenario. Honeybees will forage up to about 3 miles, so they'll come into contact with a lot of other honeybees from other colonies. If they have some sort of vector disease, if they have a varroa mite, they're likely to share it with their neighbors. Commercial pollination really speeds up the process of spreading these things. And the nature of pollination is trees only bloom for a certain amount of time. So many commercial beekeepers all across the United States will take all of their bees to California for 2 weeks for the almond pollination. So everybody comes and has a gigantic COVID party, and then we all filter back to our natural spaces. Everybody has varroa mites, period. So that's something that you need to watch out for. It's something that you need to continually treat for. If you've got a good integrated pest management system, you should be fine. Urbanization and changes in agriculture can lead to loss of reliable forage, particularly with monocropping, but it comes with the benefit of a lot of urban spaces, and a lot of people have been really into pollination gardens lately. So urban areas can really be pollination hotspots, especially if you're around here. Have you seen our flowers? So responsible beekeeping. The best way that you can be a responsible beekeeper and not spread diseases and things to all of the other hives in the area. There are a lot of beekeepers in this area. Just read, read, read. Join your local beekeeping club, get informed, talk to other beekeepers. There's a lot of different ways to do the exact same thing. So don't be discouraged if you hear 5 different pieces of information to your same question. A lot of them still have merit. It's actually fairly rare that you get a completely wrong answer. So your situation may be slightly different than another beekeeper's, but take in all the information, kind of figure it out and go, hey, this is great for my apiary. Beekeeping really is a trade built on the collective wisdom and knowledge of generations. It can't be learned in a day, it can't be learned in a decade, it can't even really be learned in a century, and that's about all the longer we're gonna last. Talked about most of this. How I can be responsible in the hive. So take all of this knowledge, take all of this reading, all of this networking that you've been doing, and apply your knowledge to gently work your hive. Make sure you're not upsetting them too much. Make sure if you're in an urban area, you're being responsible about your neighbors. You want to work your hive at least once every 2 weeks, particularly in the active season. This prevents swarming. This encourages you to make sure that your queen is healthy and alive. If you need to put additional boxes on, this is something that you're going to know as well. You're going to get more honey when you're doing this too, because if you're never inspecting, you don't know when to put the next box on, suddenly they swarm. Good pest management schedule for Varroa. We are going to do an entire class on bee pests and things. So if I don't talk about it a ton today, we are going to do a whole nother class. Know how and when to feed and provide water sources. Water sources basically all year round. In the wintertime, the rain will help as your water source, but it's really important to provide water for your honeybees during drier weather. A single colony can gather up to about 2 liters in a day. So when and how to begin? So consider the cost and start as early as possible. I like to tell people if you're getting into beekeeping and you want to start buying supplies and get bees this year, try and start in January. It's financially demanding. So if you're first starting out, it's a good idea like, oh, I'm going to buy a couple boxes this month. I'm going to buy some frames this month and just do it little by little and you won't get overwhelmed. The upfront costs with all the woodenware and the bees and everything are generally much higher than maintenance costs. So don't be too concerned. The pressure will go away a little bit. Then you're mostly going to be focused on Varroa management, feeding sugar, and that sort of thing. Beekeeping supplies have become more expensive in recent years. I do have a little mock-up from, I think this was December of 2022. So prices have risen a little bit, but this is still mainly what you're looking at here for the set that you see in this picture.
What's that? I can't see what that number at the bottom is.
Yeah. The number at the bottom of that receipt is $538.94. And that's just bare bones right there. This is just the woodenware you see in the photo. So you do want to have your setup absolutely complete and ready by the time the bees arrive. Depending on if you're getting nukes or packages, this could be sometime in mid to late April or sometime in May. So we've got a couple of seasonal tasks here. Consider that every single year is going to be slightly different. So this is pretty general, but as far as seasonal tasks, this is kind of what you're looking at. Winter is a great time when the bees aren't really active, you're not doing a whole lot of hive work, to build and repair any bee equipment you have. Watch the weather for any emergency feeding if you do have existing hives. So this Monday, Tuesday, we've got weather in the 70s with sun. If you've got existing hives, go out there this weekend, Monday, Tuesday, and take a look, see if they need any emergency feeding. Expand your beekeeping knowledge with a good book. It's been raining cats and dogs out there. Grab a book, grab a blanket. It's a really good time to just keep up on your reading. Make sure you get your bees pre-ordered as soon as possible. Usually at Chenard's, we start pre-orders for bees in January. So first week of January, we'll get our pre-orders going. If you get your order in right away, then you don't have to worry about it. April and May is when packages and nukes are going to be arriving. You're going to feed your colonies really heavily. They're going to be eating a ton of resources, particularly if it's rainy weather and they can't actually get out to forage.
Is sugar water adequate for feed?
That's a good question. Is sugar water adequate for feed? In the beginning, you're going to want to feed sugar syrup and protein. We're going to get into this later in the class as far as which ratios to use and how much and when to feed. April, May, you're also going to begin your regular hive inspections. Right now, if you have existing colonies, you'll just be waiting for any kind of weather. You don't have to do once every 2 weeks because the weather simply won't allow it. But April, May, the weather starts to get a little bit better and you can really start getting into your habits for spring. You're also going to be treating for Varroa. Depending on if you get package or nuke, you're going to be treating with something different and you're going to be waiting a different amount of time before you treat, but we're going to get into that a little bit later as well. May and June usually is when you will start to add your honey supers, get your wax built up. The blackberries are going to start blooming sometime, probably early June, and that's what you're really waiting for. So you want to get everybody built up, you want to get them ready to fill that super as soon as the blackberries come out. Continue your hive inspections. If you have a honey super on, do not treat for Varroa. There are, actually, there's only one medication that I know of that is organic that you can treat with a honey super on. It's FDA approved for honey supering. I don't recommend it. I don't ever treat when my honey super is on. It's just my rule. So it's safer. If you've got a honey super on, you're planning on putting that honey on your table, don't use medication on the bees. It's only going to be on there for about a month. So you can wait a month to treat. Question in the back?
You mentioned the blackberry. Is that an important food source?
That's a good question. Blackberries. Blackberries are probably the biggest honey flow in the area. So
people are eradicating.
There are still so many blackberries around. People can eradicate as much as they want. It's still going to be the main honey crop, and I'm not worried about them going anywhere anytime soon. They are an incredible weed. We'll just put it that way. There are several other honey flows that you can be worried about. Right now, all the maples are blooming. If you've ever had maple honey, it is the strangest thing you've ever tasted, but it's amazing. We only really get a crop of maple honey every couple of years because it's rainy and the bees can't go out and collect. But if you ever get a chance to get some maple honey, particularly big leaf maple, the big 60-footers with the gigantic flowers, just check it out. It'll blow your mind. It doesn't taste anything like honey at all. Getting into July and August, some people harvest their honey late. I harvest my honey early because of Varroa management and because I want to get my hives built up again for winter. I want to give them time to restock. So last week of July, consistently, is when I harvest my honey as long as it is ripe. And we'll get into when the honey is ripe a little bit later too. Continue your hive inspections. I should probably just have this in bold. Continue your hive inspections. If you can inspect, do inspect. Watch for late season robbing in July and August. So this is when your yellow jackets are going to be coming out and they're going to be attacking your honeybees. If you have a couple of colonies in your yard, maybe one of the colonies is weaker, one of the colonies is stronger. The strong one is going to try and rob the honey from the weak one. So honeybees are robbers, wasps are robbers. You're going to see all sorts of things at this time of year, wanting all of the honey from your hive. So keep an eye on that. And we'll get into robbing a little bit later also. July and August, you're going to start feeding again. May, June, you have your honey supers on. They're gathering enough food. They don't need to be fed in May, June. So July, August, when you take your honey supers off, you're going to be feeding again. September, October, you're going to watch for late season robbing. You're going to treat for Varroa. As the rains begin, you want to stop feeding your liquid syrup and settle into winter. When it starts raining a bunch, they can't handle all that extra moisture and it just becomes a drain on the colony. So if it's raining outside, there's no liquid in the hive. This is also the time you'd add any winterizing equipment. So what hive setup should I choose? This is a question for you as the beekeeper. I can't tell you what hive you should have, what setup you'd like. The bees will handle anything. They'll handle a wicker basket full of down. They don't care. So get the setup that works for you and your purposes. Once you start with a particular piece of equipment, it's really hard to swap. So get used to which different hive setups you have available to you, which one is really going to work for you. We're going to be talking about Langstroth 8 and 10 frame today, but you may like something like an AZ cabinet hive or a top bar hive or a horizontal hive or something like that. They're all viable options, particularly if you have weight limitations, but the treatment is a little bit different on them. I'm less familiar with top bar hives and things, but they're more difficult to feed, more difficult to treat. So keep that in mind as well. Honey harvest is another thing. Top bar hives don't have any real foundation or structure, so you can't harvest in a honey extractor. So keep in mind, do I want to harvest on a honey extractor or do I want to hand harvest or do a cut comb? This is going to make a difference in which equipment you're going to be using too. So removable frame hive types. Like I said, we're going to be talking about the Langstroth hive. There's two different sizes, the 8 frame or the 10 frame. The difference is usually about 20 pounds. The flow hive is an adaptation of the Langstroth hive. Most of your flow hives, you're just going to buy the super where the honey goes, and you're going to buy the frame. So you can add that to a Langstroth hive and save yourself a lot of money. The top bar hive is kind of a horizontal hive where you just have a bunch of bars on top instead of a full frame. Horizontal hives are similar, but they do have 4 edges on each of their frames. Slovenian cabinet hives, I recommend you look this up. Just Google Slovenian cabinet hive. They're fantastic. The beekeepers over there are all wonderful artists as well. So it may not be super practical for you to have one of these hives, but it's definitely worth checking out. There are German plastic hives, which mimic the Langstroth, but use a different material, plastic. There's also polystyrene, which is somewhat of a newer thing, but is quite a bit more insulated than the wood hives. So hive placement. You've decided on which type of hive you want, where you're going to put it now. You want to have your hives built, painted, and in place at least a month before your bees arrive. If you've got a fresh coat of paint on there and you try and put bees in there, they're just going to scoop. They don't like paint fumes. So consider how many hives you're going to have. 2 hives are great for a backyard scenario. It's not a whole lot of extra work to inspect 2 hives instead of 1. And then it gives you a bigger perspective. What's normal, what's not, which hive did better than the other. If you get an Italian and a Carniolan, it's great to compare, like, oh, I like this one better, I like that one better. And you just have something to kind of reference what's normal. 3 hives is a little bit extra work. Once you get into 4 hives, it's a job. So 2 hives is a really good happy medium. Hives can be marked not only for your reference, but also for your bees' reference. If you put little markings up at the entrance of your hive, maybe you do a circle and a square, or you do red and a yellow. Bees recognize different little markings at their entrances, and they're less likely to drift from one hive to the other. They can recognize differences between odd and even numbers too. So if you have 3 rectangles on one hive and you've got 2 on the other, like, oh, odd and even number. It's something about resource collection and flower petal numbers, I think, that they've gotten this down. But there have been a couple of really interesting studies where scientists have proven that, yes, honeybees can tell the difference between odd and even. Hives can be placed right side by side as long as you can get around the hives to work them, or they can be separated. You can put one in the front, one in the back. You can put them side by side. I usually put at least 3 feet of distance in between the hives, not only so that I can go in between, but also so that I can keep the weeds down in between. Southern or eastern exposures are best. You want them to have the optimal amount of morning sun. That way they get out of the hive nice and early. They have a long day of foraging ahead of them. You also want to protect them from wind. So southern eastern exposure, kind of move them around, make sure that their flight path is not directly in a wind gust. Nobody wants to try and open their wings and fly when there's a bunch of wind going across the entrance. Deciduous trees, as long as you are keeping up on hive maintenance consistently through the fall, make good afternoon shade in summer, give really good sun in winter. I have mine under a deciduous tree. It works really well, but there is a certain amount of cleanup involved, so that's something that you can consider. You want to keep the entrance of the hive a good 6 feet from any high traffic areas or obstacles. The bees like to take off from their entrance and just go 6 feet out, and then they'll disperse. So 8 feet, 10 feet out, you can walk by the hive, basically undisturbed on a good, gentle queen. Be a good neighbor and know your local laws. Nuisance laws are really the only laws applicable to beekeepers with 4 or fewer beehives in this general region, Corvallis, Philomath, Albany. If you have more than 4 hives, things differ a little bit. But nuisance laws are really the only things you're worried about here. If you do have 5 or more hives, there is state registration that you need to be aware of. So it is $10 plus 50 cents per hive if you have 5 or more hives. All the proceeds are going to go straight to OSU Honeybee Labs for research on honeybee nutrition, Varroa destructor, and they're doing a lot of research on foul brood diseases right now as well. You can check out more information right here in this little booklet, which I've got the link down there for you. Anyone who's here today, please feel free to pick up a copy of this booklet if you don't already have one. That's some really good info in there. So we're getting into a little bit of vocabulary now. So there's 2 different box styles that we carry here. Really, there's 3, but we only carry 2 because it's complicated and I don't want to have to deal with the smaller ones. 2 different box styles, a whole bunch of different names. So you're going to hear more experienced beekeepers calling them probably multiple names for the same box. So your small box at the top, this is for your honey collection. They're small because honey is incredibly heavy. So you don't want to be using really big, deep boxes for honey. These boxes could be called honey supers, honey boxes, Western boxes, Western hive bodies, medium hive bodies. There's an assortment of names for these boxes. So don't be discouraged. There's just a lot of different names for the same thing. Personally, I call these Western boxes or honey supers. The bottom boxes, which are usually quite a bit larger, these house the brood nest for the bees and the resources for the bees that you do not harvest. These are the brood chambers, the brood necks, deep boxes, deep hive bodies. Not all beekeepers actually use deeps. Personally, I use all Westerns. So my brood nest is in 3 Western boxes instead of 2 deep boxes. It definitely helps for your back. 8 frame versus 10 frame. Literally the only difference is you can fit 2 more frames in a 10 frame than an 8 frame. When you're considering honeybee frames, the 10 frame will hold 10 frames, the 8 frame will hold 8 frames. The length is exactly the same. The width is the only difference. Your 8 frame is a 14-inch and your 10 frame is a 16 1/4. The weight is significantly different. So a lot of beekeepers like to go with the 8 frame, particularly your backyard beekeepers. It is, considering it's full of honey, 80 pounds versus 100 pounds. I'd rather lift 8. So 8 frame equipment, if you follow Dewey Caron's honeybee loss report for the Pacific Northwest, over the years, he's been doing this 20, 30 years now, something like that. He has found in his statistics that 8 frame actually does have a slightly higher survivability rate than 10 frame. I think mainly because the 8 framers are backyard beekeepers and the commercial guys always use 10 frame. Backyarders tend to take a little bit more careful care of their colonies because they have so many fewer colonies. But that's just my take on that. So let's build a hive. I've got a hive set up right over here so you guys can see it. I'm also going to have good pictures on the screen, but I'm going to go through each piece of a honeybee hive, what it's for, and a couple different names for it, and when you should be adding it. So the 10 frame hive is the industry standard. This is what we're going to be going through today. So for our intents and purposes, each box is going to have 10 frames here. And you'll just have to do the math for 8 frame. So one full Langstroth hive setup. You're going to need a telescoping top, and it's called a telescoping top because it's always on top no matter what box it's on. So you may add or remove boxes, the telescoping top stays in the position on the very top. The feeder, there's a lot of different options for feeders. Some of them are top feeders, some of them are within your brood nest. This isn't actually pictured here, but there are tons of different options, and you'll just have to find out which feeder works best for you. The all seasons inner cover or standard inner cover. The all seasons inner cover is pictured here. It's this box right below the telescoping top. It has extra ventilation. So this is good for summer ventilation, winter ventilation to remove moisture. It's good to house your feeder as well. So lots of different things that you can do with this. We have a honey super on here, and it's a 10 frame. So we have 10 Western frames. The queen excluder is not pictured, but this prevents your queen from getting into the honey box and laying a bunch of eggs where you're trying to have your food. We have 2 deep brood boxes. That's the general number that you're going to have on your hive. Number of honey supers will change from year to year, but the brood boxes, you really want 2 brood boxes every year. We have an entrance reducer, which you can barely see in this picture, but this reduces the entrance from being a full-size entrance to either a 2-inch or a 1/4-inch entrance. And then the screen bottom board down here just has the flight board so that your honeybees can get in and out of the hive. It's raised up off the ground. It's got a screen so debris can fall through, and it has a little slit in the back so you can insert a mite board to mite checks. Your hive stand can be basically anything. You can use metal, you can use concrete. I like to use cinder blocks. Pallets work, but they're kind of hard to level. There are a lot of commercial stands out there that are very expensive too. They're pretty, they work well, but I personally just like the cinder blocks. Going into a little bit more detail, we're building from the bottom up now. The screen bottom board sets on your hive stand, your cinder blocks, your commercial hive stand, what have you. Got a question in chat here. I was assembling my frames yesterday with wedge top frames and wax foundation, and the wedge kept breaking and splintering. Am I doing something wrong, or are those types of frames just difficult? They can be a little bit difficult. I usually just gently remove the wedge with my fingers. Sometimes it splits, sometimes it doesn't. And then you've got wood glue on hand anyhow, so you can wood glue that back together. And the wedge is really just going to keep the foundation in place. So if it's slightly bent or broken, it's not a huge deal. You are going to have to be careful with your real wax foundations though. Most of your real wax foundations, unless they are heavily wired, cannot go through your traditional honey extractors. They'll explode. So you'll have to do either a cut comb scenario where you harvest the comb and the honey and put them in little boxes, or you will have to do gravity drains. So it's a little bit more work, but it can be very rewarding as well.
When you said explode,
Mm-hmm.
really explode?
Yes, I tried it.
What does that look like?
So I use a radial extractor, so I can fit 6 frames inside my radial extractor. When you put that frame in, there's a lot of force going around, and the entire thing will just smash to the side. And then you pull it out, and you've got this empty frame and a bunch of messy wax on the inside of your extractor. So it's a big mess, and then you don't have the wax for the bees anymore. If you use a plastic foundation, you can use the radial extractor. If you use a whole lot of wire to hold everything in place, you can put your real wax foundations through the extractor too. But there's always the risk because they're a lot more delicate. So hive boxes, brood chambers, whichever terminology you like to use for them. This is going to function as the house for your colony. This will stay with your colony throughout the season. It will house brood, which is bee babies, food, workers, drones. The queen is going to be in here as well. This is your space for the bees. You don't harvest anything from here. This is just for the bees. And this is the most important area to inspect when you're doing your hive inspections. So box number 1 sets on your screen bottom board. Box number 2 is placed directly on top of box number 1 when additional space is needed. When you first get your bees, be it a package or a nuke or whatever, you're going to want them to fill out that first brood box before you put another brood box on. I use the 70% rule. So in a 10 frame hive body, I'm going to wait until they've filled out at least 7 frames, and then I'm going to put another box on. You never want them to run out of room. So you want to put that box on before they've gotten all 10 frames filled, or they might go, oh, there's not enough room here, and they'll split. So make sure there's enough room, but you don't want to put the box on too soon, because if you've got 3 frames being used in your 10 frame box, you throw another box on, you get what's called the chimney effect. Bees in the wild naturally want to build up. So if you have 3 frames in a bottom box, set up a second box on top, you're going to have 3 frames in both boxes and nothing on the sides. So wait for them to build out and then add your new box. Through all of that. So the queen excluder goes on top of your brood nest. This separates your brood nest from your honey super. It's kind of a hot topic. Some people use this, some people don't. Personally, I like to use them, but I don't like the one pictured here. You are going to have issues with wax buildup, propolis buildup. There's not a whole lot of space between the 2 boxes and the queen excluder, so you're going to have quite a few bees that are going to get squished when you use this. I like to use a wood-bound excluder, which gives you a little bit of extra space on either side, prevents all the squishings, and then it still makes it so your queen can't get up into your honey super. So a couple different styles. There's the metal one you see here. There's the plastic version, which used to be cheaper, but plastic's gone pretty sky high as far as pricing goes. So metal, plastic are kind of interchangeable. Main benefit of the plastic is it gets super, super filthy. You throw it away, get a new one. But I definitely prefer the wood-bound excluder. It's easier to clean, has less bee deaths, and still provides the same function. So your honey super, depending on what kind of a season we're having, you might have 1 honey super on your hive, harvest and put it back on. You might have 1 honey super on your hive, it fills up, you add another honey super, it fills up, you add another honey super. Oh my gosh, you're doing a 4th honey super suddenly. If we have just an awesome year. This is Oregon. You guys are probably going to get 2 at max.
So, hey, you just take the full one and put it into an on and just rotate them?
Yeah. So depending on your harvest style, if you want to do all of your harvest at one time, there are a couple different methods that you can use. If you have a full honey super and you're ready to put another honey super on there, you can choose to raise your full honey super and put an empty one below. So it's really easy for them to continue filling that. Or you can be lazy like me and just put the honey super on top. They're already going to the full honey super, they're going through, and then they're filling up the next box. So long as they have space to continue to bring honey in, they will. So keep on adding those boxes. And then I harvest all at once in July.
And you do use the excluder?
I do use the excluder, yes. But there is a little bit of a caveat with the queen excluder. If you're brand new, you're just getting your bees to fill up those wax combs, and you put an empty honey super on there and a queen excluder. The queen excluder does provide a little bit of resistance. Your workers can go through, but if they don't feel like there's any reason to, they won't. So I like to leave the queen excluder off for about 1 to 2 weeks when I put a brand new unfilled honey super on there, and that gets some interest going. They start to build comb. In the beginnings, they're just building the comb. It's not wide enough to even allow the queen to go up there. She doesn't really have an interest in half-built comb, so she doesn't. Once there's an interest, they've started to build, then you can put the queen excluder in there, and they've already started to build, so they'll continue to build even with that resistance.
Sure, you get them locked upstairs.
That's a good question too. How do you make sure you didn't accidentally lock the queen upstairs? So be mindful that you get that honey, the queen excluder on as they're building it. They have begun to build it, but they haven't built it out to the point that she has any interest in it. And you're also going to do a pretty thorough inspection when you put it on, and you're just going to look at both sides of each frame and make absolutely sure she's not there. In the beginning phases of building, you're not going to have a whole bunch of bees up there, so it's going to be pretty easy to tell if she's there.
And I know I read something about rotating my brood boxes,
Yes,
so if they're both full, do you still rotate those, or?
that's a good
Well-
question. When should you rotate your brood boxes? If your brood boxes are both full, you don't really need to do any rotating. Generally, when people rotate their brood boxes, it's for an overwintered colony. And like I said, honeybees naturally want to rise up. So through the winter, they'll rise up and follow the food. Your bottom brood box is probably completely empty right now. They're all up here. So that's where you would take your brood box, put it on top, and then they'll continue to move up. So if you allow your overwintered colony just to sit and you don't move any of the boxes, honeybees don't like to go down, and chances are you're gonna have an empty brood box throughout the entire season. So that's why I move my brood box up. But if you've got your colony split between two brood boxes, leave them alone. If you have brood in both boxes, you don't want to disrupt their organization.
Right.
They're a little OCD. Question in chat, how long would it take bees to make wax before the queen excluder should be on? It really depends. It depends on how many resources are coming in. It depends on how much you're feeding, and it depends on just your individual queen. She's going to have different genetics, and she's going to have different amounts of, she'll have her workers work harder or not. This is why it's so important to do your once every 2 week hive inspection, is to just keep track, like, oh, these bees are building really fast. Let's get that queen excluder on. These bees are building a little slower. Maybe we'll wait an extra week. So it changes on a honeybee to honeybee basis. Going into honey supers. So this houses all the honey stores for bees and harvest. Some people will leave one honey box on to overwinter their colonies, and this is totally fine. Some beekeepers think that's really dumb and they don't ever do that. So depending on which beekeeper you're talking to, you're going to get a different opinion. I say this differently every time, but if you ask 10 different beekeepers the same question, you're going to get probably 15 different answers. 14 of them are going to be completely correct. So where are we? When do I add supers? So you want to add your supers, again, with the 70% rule. Once your brood nest or your 2 brood boxes are about 70% full, you're going to want to add them when the honey flow begins. So you're looking at major honey flow being blackberries up here in Pacific Northwest. That's sometime probably early June. You're going to see lots of nectar during your hive inspection. So you're going to look at your hive inspections. You're going to be able to tell, like, oh, this is brood, this is pollen, this is nectar. You're going to see a lot of incoming nectar. And that's when you're going to know, oh, it's time to put my supers on. The number of supers, like I said, varies from year to year. First year beekeepers don't really expect any honey. Second year beekeepers, you've got a whole bunch of wax already built. It takes a lot of energy to build wax. They've already got wax built. All they have to do is bring in the nectar. So second year, you've got your wax built. You're probably going to have some honey. Typically 1 to 2 supers are used in our location, but I've seen up to 3 supers being full. I had 3 supers last year. So strength of the colony, productivity, your queen genetics, these all play roles in what you can expect for the year's honey. Availability of nectar, the weather is a huge thing. If blackberries come and we've got a weird, I don't know, June freeze, maybe that's going to negatively impact the honey for that year. So your all seasons inner cover. This is actually one of my favorite tools. Most beekeepers start with a standard inner cover, but it has a lot less functionality. The inner cover's main function, the whole reason we have inner covers at all, is because we've got this nice telescoping top. And if you look at your telescoping top, your hive rests inside here. And if you have this glued shut, it's going to be really hard to pry it off. You're probably going to destroy this in the process of removing it. So your inner cover is going to have this barrier between this box and your honey colony so they don't feel shut. And for those in chat, sorry, I walked away there. Your inner cover is going to go in between your main brood chambers and honey chambers and your telescoping top here, honeybees glue all of their boxes together with the exception of the feeder box because it's not really their house. It's more of just where they get their food. So it just prevents your top cover from being completely glued to the rest of your hive. The cool thing about the all seasons inner cover versus your standard inner cover is it's quite a bit taller. It can house a top feeder, and it has ventilation holes. There's a variety of things that you can use this for. The ventilation holes are great for summer. It kind of helps to cool the hive, let a little bit of wind in, not wind, but breeze. In the wintertime, your colony, as they cluster, creates moisture when they shiver, and that moisture has to go somewhere. So it creates ventilation at the top of the hive to release moisture as well.
So if you have those 4 holes, you should leave them open all winter too?
Yes, I am definitely all for ventilation. A lot of beekeepers are like one way or the other, either ventilation or insulation. I'm fully ventilation because we don't really have exceptionally cold winters. We have very wet winters. So the more moisture I can get to escape the hive, the happier I am and the higher chance I have of survivability. Instead of the feeder you putting in this box in the summertime, during the winter you remove the feeder. You can put moisture wicking materials in here too, so you can add burlap, you can use some beach towels, you can use compact fiber boards, anything you can get to alleviate the moisture in the hive. If you put moisture wicking materials in here, it's very important to note that you're going to have to go in and you're going to have to replace that moisture wicking material. If you fill up the sponge in there, the water has nowhere to go after that, and then it actually is worse than not having anything in there at all. So I usually just leave it completely empty, let it ventilate. If you put moisture wicking materials in there, make sure to replace them on a regular basis. And finally, the telescoping top. Functionality is the lid of your hive. It provides full coverage against the rain. All 4 corners are going to go down over the sides of the hive, so sideways rain isn't really going to get into your colony. It is heavy too, and that is definitely for a reason. You don't want wind knocking your hive cover over. You don't want a raccoon coming up and being curious, popping it off. Your telescoping cover should be nice and heavy. And if you're worried about it, maybe you have an extra piece of board that you can have for an extra rain break, have a big rock to set on top of it in case you cut a larger animal around who's curious. Don't even bother with bears. Bears want your hive, that's it. I'm talking like raccoons and things. So it goes above your inner cover. Inner cover and telescoping top have got to go together. Doesn't matter what type of inner cover, but inner cover and telescoping top is extremely important. I have forgotten it before. Trust me, you don't want to do that. So getting into frames now, different frame sizes for different boxes. You have your deep brood box here. You have your deep frame, which goes with it. You have your Western hive box or your super and your Western frame that goes with it. So how many frames do I need? Depends on if you have an 8 frame or 10 frame. It's recommended to have a couple extra frames on hand. Frames do break, sometimes they warp. Every now and then you'll get a frame just full of drone comb. You'll need to replace it with another frame until you can get it cleaned out. I've got a 10% discount if you buy 10 frames at a time. So it's good to have a couple extra frames on hand. Just buy all 10, and if you've got 2 extra, that's actually a really good thing. Can I use Western frames in a deep box? Technically, they'll fit. In a pinch, you can do this, but we're going to talk about burr comb a little bit here. Burr comb to a beekeeper is like a weed to a gardener. It's in the eye of the beholder. A nice flower can be a weed if it's in the wrong place in the garden. If you have wax comb in the wrong place in a hive, that's burr comb and you want to remove it. So basically, burr comb is any comb in the hive in a place where you don't want it. If you have a small frame in a large box, chances are the honeybees are going to fill out this frame with comb, and then they're going to go ahead and just fill out the bottom of it too. and that's going to be really brittle. It's probably all going to be drone comb rather than worker comb, so you're really not going to want it around. And it just becomes a mess. So you can do this, but I really don't recommend it. Okay.
How can I tell my drum worker?
That's a good question. I'm going to get into that a little bit later, but how can you tell a drone comb from worker comb? The size is a huge thing. Worker comb is going to be flush with the wax. It's going to be nice and even and pretty. Drone comb is bubbly. Drones are much larger than workers, and all of their cappings are going to be raised and bubbly and just kind of disorganized. So it's really obvious.
Oh, so they have to be full to really tell
Yes.
Okay.
You can tell just based on the size of the cell, but it's a little bit more difficult. Yes. So we talked about this briefly in the beginning. What is bee space? So bee space is the reason L.L. Langstroth got to be the grandfather of beekeeping. It is 3/8 of an inch. So basically just enough space for one bee to get by. 3/8 of an inch is the space that bees will not draw comb. They're going to want to leave that 3/8 of an inch completely undrawn so that they can travel. And so a lot of your Langstroth hive keeps bee space in mind. There are 3/8 of an inch from frames to hive wall, top bars to inner cover, bottom bars to hive bottom. So if you're building your own hive, keep in mind you might run into a couple of snags if you don't keep very, very specific measurements. It becomes a huge mess when all of your frames are glued together and your frames are glued to the box, and it's pretty specific. But bees don't read our books. So as you can see here, there were 2 frames side by side, and the bees decided to draw it out completely wrong. Instead of along the frame, they've drawn it in between the frames. This is a problem here. This is another reason that you want to be doing your once every 2-week hive inspections. If you did a hive inspection once every 2 weeks, you'd see this pretty quickly. You'd be able to remove it so that they could draw it out properly. Once you leave it for long enough, it becomes a huge mess. Then you've got honey all over the place. You have a chance of getting robbers in the hive. You just want to nip this in the bud as soon as possible.
enjoy the snack.
And enjoy the snack, yes. So types of foundation. There are lots of different types to choose from. Everybody has a little bit of a different opinion about which one they want. And there really are no wrong answers here. It's just important to know the pros and the cons here. Personally, I use right cell plastic foundation. So that's the yellow or the black you see in the photo. They are extremely durable. They're easy to use. The colors do not matter to the bees, it's just to the beekeeper. I like to use yellow for my honey, looks pretty. I like to use black for my brood nest. It's easy to see white eggs on a black background. Old or misdrawn wax can be scraped away, so frames can be reused instead of tossed and having to buy new ones. Frames can be safely spun in a centrifuge, so it's really easy to harvest these frames. Real wax is something that a lot of beekeepers like to use. The acceptance rate is extremely high on real wax. Sometimes bees don't really want to build on plastic, and there are different ways that you can encourage them to build. You can spray sugar water on there, you can rub them with real wax. Ultimately, I've never really had a problem with acceptance on any plastic frames, but real wax does have a higher acceptance rate. They are all natural. It's all beeswax. The bees recognize it as beeswax. It smells like beeswax. They are exceptionally fragile. So when you have a partially drawn real wax frame, it's only going to be connected to the top, maybe the sides. If you flip that frame over to take a look at it, it's all going to fall on the floor and you feel really bad. So be very careful when you're handling these frames when they're not fully drawn. This is really great for cut comb production. If you're looking to harvest your honey and put it honey and comb in the same little box and sell it as cut comb, this is what you're going to want to do. You're going to do either real wax or foundationless, but it is a lot of extra work. And to do real good cut comb honey, you need to have perfect timing. So if the wax is white, the nectar is fresh, but capped, you can use this. If you have your honey capped and you wait a little while, that wax is going to change color, and the cut comb honey isn't going to be It's still going to be good, but it's not going to be as high quality. When you're going for cut comb honey, you want real fresh white wax. Foundationless is definitely all natural. Like you see here, it's just the wood. They can just give them a little bit of a foundation to build on, and it's all the bees. You don't have to do anything for them. The problem with this is there's a lot of potential for improperly drawn comb. You're giving them a bunch of frames and they might do what's called cross comb. So instead of building across the frame, they'll build across all of the frames. And you really, really don't want to do that. So if you're a beginner beekeeper, I recommend avoiding foundationless, or if you want to do a foundationless frame, that's fine. Just put it in between two plastic right cell frames. That way there's less opportunity for things to be messed up. Foundationless, you just can't extract it in an extractor. It's way too fragile. It is wonderful for cut comb production though. And drawn comb applies to any of the frames that I just talked about that the bees have actually worked on. So if they have drawn out cells, so I've got two photos down here. These are both drawn combs. One is fully drawn that you see up here on the left. One is partially drawn. They're still working on it. But a drawn comb is anything that the bees have constructed themselves, and the cells are deep enough to have resources or brood. They are probably the most valuable thing a beekeeper has. You want to keep this drawn comb around as much as possible. It takes a lot of energy to build comb. So if you have pre-drawn comb, all the bees have to do is fill it with resources. They don't need to eat those resources to make more comb. So keep this around for sure.
Another thing I see, and I get so many different takes on it. How many years can you use a frame once it's drawn?
That's a good question with a lot of different answers. How many years can you use a drawn frame? I like to replace my comb every 2 or 3 years, and I'll replace one at a time and just kind of filter through. As long as it's undiseased and it's been used just for honey, you can use it for way longer than that. But if you have a brood frame and you've been using it for 2 or 3 years, you'll notice that as brood hatches out, they leave a little bit of the pupal casing behind, and those cells become shallower and shallower to the point that the queen can't really lay anymore in it. So they'll become kind of unusable after a while. So depth of comb is really important.
And will they use those, can you use those for honey then, or just get rid of them?
I'd recommend just getting rid of the old brood frames that are really shallow. You're not going to be able to fit a lot of honey in there in the first place, and then there's going to be a lot of excess debris and things. You can filter them out, you can use sieves and things, but it's better to use honey frames as honey frames, brood frames as brood frames. Got a couple questions in chat here. Is there a concern with toxins for either plastic or wax foundation? Not that I know of. I haven't noticed any odd flavors or anything. I don't think it exudes anything, so I wouldn't really worry about it. We've been using these plastic foundations for years and years and years. And do you get drawn comb after harvesting honey? And can you scrape off brood frames? So yes to both. Once you extract your honey harvest, if you use a radial extractor like I do, all you're doing is you're uncapping, you're releasing the honey into your bin, and then you've got this uncapped comb that's still ready for the bees. So you can put those harvested frames directly back in your hive and they can still use those. If you're doing cut comb honey, you kind of have to start from scratch. So that's another benefit of getting just liquid honey, is you retain the wax for the bees. And we actually have a whole new class on that. So that's going to be something we're going to get into a little bit later in the season.
After you harvest, so the comb that's been used, you store that in a special way?
Yes. So after I harvest, say I harvest 3 boxes of honey, I'm not going to put 3 boxes back on my colony all winter long. I do want the bees to clean it. There's still going to be a lot of honey residue in those combs. So I put all 3 boxes that I've harvested back on my colony for 3 days. After about 3 days, they've cleaned it all up. They've taken all the excess honey and they've stored it down below. And then I can remove those boxes and put them in my garage for the season with light and a fan.
Oh, yeah.
I have some that have been the honey's been extracted and then just stored.
Mhm.
They'll clean all that up though, that's the residue, the honey on that still,
Mhm.
after stored through the winters.
The bees are exceptionally good at cleaning frames. So if you've had stored frames that you've got in your garage and they've got excess honey on them, maybe they've molded, they're just disgusting frames. You put them back in the hive, 2 or 3 days later, it's fine. The bees clean it all out and then they'll reuse. Wax moth damage is really the only exception. If you have really crazy wax moth damage, it's just really awful. You put those back in the hive, chances are they might actually reject that. But if it's just mold or honey or dirty frames, the bees will clean that up, no problem. I've got another question in chat. Can you scrape off brood frames? So old brood frames that have shallow cells on right cell plastic foundation, you can absolutely scrape those and start over again, have them rebuild. Honestly, sometimes it's easier just to scrap the whole thing and get a new frame. But if you use your hive tool on a nice hot day, you can usually scrape them back to the foundation and reuse those frames even after several years. So that's another benefit to the right cell foundation. So beekeeping tools and apparel. We'll just talk about the absolute essentials here. Just 3 items. It's not too bad, right? We'll get into the toys later. But your hive tool is your absolute best friend. It is kind of like learning to knit or crochet. Learn how to hold your hive tool. Your hive tool should never leave your hand when you're out in the apiary, ever. You do everything with your hive tool in your hand. So I hold it just with these 2 fingers, and then I have my other 3 fingers available to do everything else in the hive. And then I can easily go and then start using my hive tool. So hive tool in your hand at all times when you're in the apiary. Just get used to having it as an extension of your arm. You're going to be using this to lift frames. You're going to be using this to unglue your hive so you can actually open it. You're going to be using it to scrape burr comb out, to remove drone comb, to scoop bees over just gently so that you can see a cell beneath them. You'll use this hive tool for everything. Smoker. Oops. Your smoker is, if not your first best friend, your second best friend. Some people think, oh, well, it's not nice to smoke the bees. It's also not nice to kill all the bees. So smoke is not just for the beekeeper. It keeps the bees calm. It interrupts their alarm pheromone. As they're trying to disperse alarm pheromone, you're smoking the alarm pheromone out. They don't sense it as well. They're not going to all get into an uproar. So you're going to be calmer. The bees are going to be calmer. There are going to be less squishing deaths. This is also great, not only for keeping the bees calm, but for moving the bees. So a couple of nice puffs just over the top, spread a little bit of a smoke cloud out. This prevents your alarm pheromone. A couple of short, quick puffs right next to a frame is going to move the bees from that area so that you can see beneath. And it's also going to move the bees from around the area where you want to set your other hive bodies back on. So you move the bees into the hive before you put your next piece of equipment back on. Apparel, full PPE is definitely recommended for beginners. Do the whole coveralls, the gloves, tall shoes, everything. More experienced beekeepers may prefer, oh, just a jacket, just a veil. I don't care if I get stung, that's fine. But if you're just starting out, don't make life hard on yourself. Just get the whole setup. And then you'll have it for later if you want to invite a friend over into the apiary too. Even if you think you're tough and you just want to go in with the jacket, you'll be more comfortable in full gear. Until the heat of the summer, but we'll get into that later. Social organization of honeybees. This is just going to be really brief. We're going to be learning more about this in other classes, but it's important to know that there are several castes of honeybee. There are males and females. Drones are the only males in the hive and they only occur at certain seasons. Right now, there's really no males in any of the hives. They don't overwinter. So drones appear when swarm season begins. You see male bees, you know that the colonies are trying to reproduce. They are pretty easy to spot, but they can be confused with the queen. The drones have large fly-like eyes and they're facing upwards. Reason being is they fly lower than queens. Mated queens are going to fly above honeybee drones, so it makes sense that they're always looking up. Their only really one true purpose is to mate with the queen and pass on the genetics of their former hive. The queen bee really only has one job too. All she does is lay eggs all day, every day, her entire life. She has a 2-week vacation where she goes out and parties, and that's about it. So the queen doesn't feed herself. She doesn't make any comb. She doesn't do any cleanup. She has a bunch of worker bees that follow her around all day long, taking care of everything she needs. All she does is lay eggs. The worker bee basically takes care of all other functions in the colony. Depending on where they are in their life, their job is going to be very different. So very young bees are called house bees or nurse bees. They're going to be in charge of feeding the larva, tending the queen, cleaning refuse from the hive, cutting cappings from brood that are not going to be viable, this sort of thing. As they get older, they move into mortician duties. So if there's any dead bees in the colony, they'll move those out, scoop them out the front door. As they grow old enough to really be able to fly, they are going to become forager bees, and that's basically going to be the rest of their lives. So they'll start out on pollen duties. They'll wind up either being water duty or nectar duty. So bees develop inside each of these cells, your wax cells. They're going to start as an egg, then they're going to become a larva, a pupa, and an adult. So this is the difference between worker brood and drone brood that I was mentioning earlier. Your worker brood is perfectly made to fit inside these cells. Your drone brood is a little bit bubbly. So usually drone brood comes from worker cells, and they are built out and kind of stretched to incorporate the size of the drone. Once your comb is drone comb, it will never again be used for worker comb. So most beekeepers will just have their hive tool handy and scrape out all the burr comb as they see it. Burr comb does drone brood does absolutely nothing for your hive. It will spread your genetics to other hives, which could be beneficial, leave maybe a couple of them, but really drones are the major vector for varroa mites. They have a longer gestation period, just a couple days. It's 21 days for worker, 24 days for drone brood. So varroa might understand this. They can get an extra couple of generations if they attach themselves to drone brood. So get rid of as much drone brood as you can, and you're going to sort of limit your varroa inside the hive as well.
Is that like something they're doing every time?
Yep.
Yeah.
Every time I do a hive inspection, if I see a little bubble of burr comb, drone comb, I'll scrape it out. And I always have a little bucket around. You don't want to have just random bits of comb all around your hive. You will encourage all sorts of different robbers because it's really smelly. Everybody likes wax and honey, so they'll come looking. You want to have a little bin that you can put all of your excess burr comb in, and then you can remove it from the apiary when you're done.
What do you do with it?
I just toss it. It gets pretty gross. If you have an entire frame of burr comb, scraping it is just, trust me, you don't want to do it, it's gross. Take the entire frame out, shake the bees off of it, put a new frame in because you've got some extra on hand. Take that frame away and freeze it for 3 days. It's going to be way nicer to scrape that frame when it's been frozen for a few days. No gooey explosions. So, how much drone brood do you leave? Depending on the beekeeper, you might leave a little tiny patch of it, or you might get rid of as much as possible. It also depends on your hive visits. Is your hive very gentle? Can you inspect for a little bit longer? The more drone comb you can get out of the hive, the better. It's not a huge issue if you leave a little bit of drone comb, but I try and get as much as possible before the bees decide, hey, you're done, you need to leave. Bee breeds. So I'm thinking bee breeds are a little bit like dog breeds here. These are all Apis mellifera. They're just different hybrids. So dogs are all dogs, but Chihuahua and a German Shepherd are pretty different, right? So same with bee breeds. Your Italian is your most common. Most of your commercial guys use Italian bees. They are very large colonies. They're very gentle. They don't propolize a whole bunch, so it's pretty easy to inspect. You're not having your hives glued together as much as some other breeds. They are moderately hygienic and they have high drift. High drift means that workers from one colony might accidentally go to another colony, so they have a higher chance of spreading disease. Each queen is different. So an Italian queen may be exceptionally gentle for you, or it could be a little bit more aggressive. Every queen is different. So these are basic traits for the breed, but just like you might have a really gentle German Shepherd and a really aggressive German Shepherd, same with the bees. So take everything with a grain of salt and just understand that they have different personalities.
You have an excessively aggressive hive, how do you fix that?
That's a good question. If you have an excessively aggressive hive, it kind of depends on your circumstances. If you are in a neighborhood with a bunch of people around, maybe you have some people who are concerned. I've had an aggressive hive actually here at the site on store before. They attacked anyone within about 25 feet. That's crazy aggressive. We actually had to allow them to abscond. So what we did is we waited until the evening when all the customers were gone. We lifted the lid and we just let them disperse. There are a lot of different ways of doing it. Honestly, I probably should have culled them rather than letting them abscond. You don't want those genetics to be spread to other colonies. So another thing you can do is you take a nice hot day, you go out there with some black garbage bags and you put all your boxes in black garbage bags and you effectively just fumigate them all. So, oh, don't give them to a friend. Maybe a friend with a lot of acreage. We'll send them to the farm. I got a question in chat here. If you have two deeps, will both have drone comb? The answer is almost always yes. So most of your burr comb is going to wind up being drone comb. If they don't have a foundation to build on, chances are it's probably drone comb. Typically what your queen does is she naturally wants to build some drone anyhow. So if you look at the brood frames, it's going to start in the center and your brood frames are going to kind of go out in a sphere. The drones are going to be on the outside because they're less important than the workers, and the workers are going to be more insulated. So you'll definitely have drone comb in both deeps. Getting into Carniolan breed. This is my favorite honeybee breed. I always have really good luck with the Carniolans. They are originally from Slovenia, Austria area, so they are accustomed to colder, wetter climates, which, hey, we're in the Pacific Northwest, right? They have an incredibly fast buildup in spring, even faster than the Italians, but they don't reach quite as big as a maximum size. Brood rearing is dependent on available food, less likely to starve. So if the queen realizes her workers are only bringing in minimal amounts of food, she'll lay off a little bit on her laying. So you as the beekeeper have to make sure that they're very well fed so that she continues laying properly. But going into winter, she's going to reduce her colony size to the point they can still keep the heat, but they're not necessarily going to starve. So I like their survivability, and they'll also forage on wetter, colder days. And every beekeeper has a different opinion, so that's just my opinion. They are very hygienic. They have few brood diseases. It still happens, but they seem to be more hygienic than other breeds. Very little robbing instinct, which can be a good thing or a bad thing, depending on what you're trying to accomplish. If you have a couple of hives next to each other, you don't want them robbing. Carniolans are great. If you have a couple hives out in the middle of the wilderness and they don't have very much of a alarm instinct, well, there's nothing to stop a bear or a skunk or anything from just attacking. So if you're in the middle of the wilderness, you're worried about robbing, you're not inspecting all that often, maybe you want to go with German bees. They're not very nice, but they're a little bit more better equipped to deal with larger robbers. So Carniolans are nice because they don't have a lot of burr comb buildup, but they're also not so nice because they glue everything shut. Every single time you get into a Carniolan hive, you know it's a Carniolan hive because you're going to use your hive tool around every side of every box and around every frame, and it's just going to be a struggle to get anything out of the hive box. It's worth it in my opinion. I like these bees. They're my little puppy dogs. Depending on my Carniolan queen, most of the time when I get a Carniolan queen, I can run my mower and actually touch the hive. They do not care. They're super, super gentle. That being said, my coworker has said that he has had a more aggressive carniolan hive before, and he prefers Italians. So, like I said, very much opinion. Caucasian, generally from Caucasus near the Black Sea. These are really pretty bees, but they're kind of similar to the German bees, where yes, they're slow to become aggressive, but once they are aggressive, it takes them a lot longer to calm down. They are black with gray hair. It's a general black with gray hair. It's not like super like, oh my gosh, this is a Caucasian bee, but they have a slightly different coloration. They also have the longest tongue out of any of the honeybees. So they are better at foraging specific flowers. Cool thing about the Caucasians, they have a very low swarming instinct. So if you're new, you're worried about swarming, Caucasian's a good way to go. They also have a similar survivability rate to the carniolans because they're used to colder, wetter winters. And then the standard survivor. Standard survivor is kind of like the mutt of bees. Anybody who has great hygiene, low propylizing habits, high populations, low swarming instinct. Mutts usually make the best dogs, so standard survivors are almost always a good way to go as well. So procuring bees, we're going to talk about packages, nukes, and swarms here. Package bees are basically an artificial swarm that the beekeeper has taken from a commercial apiary. They are bees from all sorts of different hives. If you check out our Facebook page, there's a video posted at the very top, how packages are made. I definitely recommend it. Features my mentor, Fred Selby, going out into the apiary and showing how packages are made from many different hives. Packages will arrive quite a bit earlier than nukes, usually about a month. They are less expensive than nukes because you don't have comb, you don't have boxes, you don't have all these resources that go with them. It's just a bunch of bees in a box. So this is great for beekeepers who already have drawn frames. It's possible if you're a brand new beekeeper to start with a package. I actually started on nothing. I had just all undrawn frames and put a package in, and I fed them and fed them and fed them, and they did great. It does take a little bit of extra work though, because they're starting with no brood, no food, no wax, nothing. So a little bit of extra work, a little bit more attention to detail to get these started from scratch. I've got a question in chat. If you have 2 hives, would you do one of each breed? And yes, I definitely would. If you're just starting out, you've got 2 hives, do one each and see which breed you like better. Maybe it's just the queen's personality, or maybe it's the actual breed you like better. So it'll take a couple years to really find out. But all honeybees are honeybees. So you can supplement one hive from the other, even if you have 2 different breeds of queen. So nukes. For some reason, even the commercial beekeepers can't figure out nuke. I see them spelled N-U-K all the time. Nuke is short for nucleus. It's the nucleus of the hive. It's basically a small portable hive. It has all the features of a regular hive in a portable way. It includes 5 drawn frames. No matter which beekeeper you get them from, you should have 5 drawn frames. Once in a while, you get a beekeeper that you get a nuke from that has 4 drawn frames and a feeder. I prefer 5 drawn frames, but either is fine. There's going to be a loose laying queen in this colony, so be really careful when you transfer. Find the queen, do not squish her, put her into the new colony. Frame composition usually has 1 empty frame. That way, if they have to stay in the nuke for a week or so, they still have room to expand. They're not going to get grumpy and take off. They have at least 1 frame absolutely full of brood, 3 frames of resources, so nectar and pollen. They're very easy to install.
Pick my daughter up.
No, it's fine.
Please.
So easy to install. All you have to do is transfer the frames in the exact same order they're in the nuke box into your new hive. Great head start because you have drawn frames, you've got resources. You still need to feed pretty religiously, but if you mess up by a day or 2, they've got some resources, so it's not the end of the world. Nuke boxes themselves are extremely handy. Most of the time, you'll just get the corrugated cardboard here. Sometimes you'll get a wooden box too. But you can use these as toolboxes for your smokers and your hive tools and things. You can use these as swarm traps. You can use them for doing a temporary split. You can use them for queen banks. You can use them for all sorts of things. So don't throw away your nuke box.
So when you get your nuke, you let them sit and calm down for
Yes.
how long before you
So-
put them in your boxes?
So when you pick up your nuke, you're gonna throw it in your car, drive to your house, you're gonna be kicking and banging around. They're probably gonna be a little bit literally shaken up.
Yeah.
So when you get them to your apiary, you put your nuke box right next to the hive that you're gonna put them in. You open the entrance and you just let them sit for 15-20 minutes, let them calm down. By the time you see just an even, steady bee line coming in and out, they're figuring out where they are, then you can do your transfer.
Okay.
You can wait overnight too, that's totally fine. They are pretty happy in the nuke box the day you pick them up to about 5 days afterwards. So if for some reason something comes up, you can install them right away. That's okay, just make sure that they have the cap off and they can forage and they can get oriented to their new location. Downside for nukes is they are quite a bit more expensive than packages, but you are getting a lot more. And they also arrive later, up to a month after packages. Swarms. So, dumb beekeeper joke here. Yes, they're freebies. So one of my favorite things about swarms is this little saying here at the top. A swarm in May is worth a load of hay. A swarm in June is worth a silver spoon, but a swarm in July ain't worth the fly. When you capture a swarm, you have to make sure that there's enough time to build that colony up, to get resources going before you go into winter. If you catch a swarm in July, chances of them being able to build up enough resources to survive winter are pretty low. So most beekeepers will just leave a swarm if they see it in July. Every year is a little bit different, and you could capture a swarm, put them in the nuke box for a little while, and actually combine them with another hive after you've pinched the queen. So there are things that you can do with swarms, but you don't know what their genetics are. You don't know what their disease content is. It's kind of up in the air. You don't really know what you're getting when you're getting a swarm. No guarantees of finding a swarm at all. Some seasons you don't really see many. Some seasons there's a swarm every week and you're getting a call from the club like, hey, can you come get this swarm? Like, I got 5 swarms already this week. So every year is a little bit different. But join your local beekeeping club and check out their phone trees. If you want to capture swarms, get on a phone tree. People will call you when they see random swarms. They don't stick around for a whole long time. So if you get a call, you pretty much need to go to a location right away. Even a couple of hours, they may have moved on. So to capture a swarm, you're going to need a container like your nuke box, your smoker, your hive tool, your suit, location specific items. Maybe you need a pruner to cut a branch. Maybe you need a lopper, a ladder. Be careful on ladders, please. Bees and ladders don't usually go well together, but all beekeepers do it. So just be careful. Swarms. Talk about this. Swarming bees are usually very gentle. The idea is when they swarm, they soak up as much honey as they can. Their honey stomachs are so full they can barely even fly. And they're just looking for a new home. They don't have anybody to defend. There's no brood. Yes, there's a queen inside, but they feel pretty secure because there's a big old lump of bees around her to protect her. So they're very docile. They're easy to transport generally. The main thing about catching a swarm is make sure you get the queen. If you leave the queen behind, chances that the swarm is going to stick around are pretty low. You'll basically know if you've captured the queen if they all start sort of forming a line and going into your box.
You just have a big round.
They can tell that quick.
They can tell very quickly where their queen is. If you get the main lump of the swarm, chances are she's in the very center. So chances are pretty good that you've got her if you drop the entire lump into the box. And then if anyone's familiar with Texas beekeeping, she sits there with no gloves, no veil, no suit, and just starts scooping them into the box. So swarms are generally very, very gentle, but I don't recommend doing that. She's a little crazy. She's amazing, but she's a little crazy. Inspections and feeding. Going to go over this very quickly because this is an entirely new class that I'm going over. So once you have your hive set up and your bees are safely inside, do not wait, immediately start feeding. Bees are in a whole new home. Like, great, do we want to stay here? What's going on? Put a bunch of food on top, they're more likely to stay. So do your hive inspections once every 2 weeks. In the springtime, you want to simulate a light nectar flow. So that is 1-to-1 ratio sugar to water. Do not ever boil the sugar syrup. Creates chemicals that you really don't want and can actually end up poisoning bees. So low and slow is fine. You can use a paddle mixer if you're doing a 5-gallon batch. You can use just your kitchen mixer if you're doing something like a 1 gallon or something. So don't ever boil. You can heat it to the point where it's warm and it's easy to mix, or you can just mix it cold like I do it. In the fall, you're going to change your ratio. So you're going to use a very thick sugar syrup, a 2-to-1 ratio. It's very difficult to mix, just have patience. The drill paddle is really helpful for this. But in the fall, when you're feeding this, it's thick enough that the bees will actually not only consume it, but they'll store it in the cells, and that'll be part of their winter feed. Protein should be fed all year round, but different ratios of protein can be used. So protein patties are effectively pollen substitutes. If pollen is in short supply, the bees will be consuming this pretty regularly. If pollen is high supply, they'll consume very little. So depending on what time of year, you can put more or less of your protein patty, depending on what your bees are actually consuming. But it's a good idea to keep a test strip in just to see if they are consuming it. So we're almost done here. I know I've been talking for a long time. There are several online resources that you can check out. We have a Facebook page, which is going into just the store page. We'll be posting updates like when live bees are going to be arriving, when you should be feeding, when you should be treating, that sort of thing. And we do have monthly garden rewards for all of our beekeeping supplies. So this month, I think it's going to be feeders. You can check out our YouTube page. This class is going to be posted to our YouTube page. All of our other beekeeping classes are there as well. Just go to playlists, beekeeping, you'll find me right there. We have several tutorials and blogs on our website, and you can check out tools for varroa management at the Honeybee Health Coalition. You can go through a couple of surveys and go, great, does my hive need to be treated? What is my mite situation? It's kind of a helpful tool as well. Got a question in chat. Can you let sugar water sit after mixing if you mix in larger batches? Yes, you can let it sit. After a while, sugar syrup does go bad. So I wouldn't mix any more than probably 2 feedings worth in a single setting. Milk jugs can be really handy for storing it too.
How long? You feed them in the spring, how long do you feed?
So I feed my honeybees in spring up until the point that either the nectar flow is on for the blackberries or the bees stop consuming it because there are enough floral resources out in nature.
And they will stop eating it.
Yep. They prefer natural nectar, so they'll stop consuming the sugar syrup all on their own.
Okay, very good. And then in the fall, once it gets so cold, they'll quit. Right?
Once you hit fall, you're really looking at the weather.
Yeah.
You want to feed them as much 2-to-1 sugar syrup as they'll consume. If they stop consuming it, you can remove it. Or if you see, oh gosh, the rains are starting, then you remove it too. So a couple of really good resources. The Beekeeper's Handbook, the Backyard Beekeeper, Garden Plants for Honeybees, the Hive and the Honeybee, and Honeybee Biology and Beekeeping. They're all really great for beginners. All of them have really nice pictures, whether they're drawn or full color. They're written extremely well, and I recommend getting a couple different ones because you're going to have a couple different opinions. All of these are great for beginners and intermediate, even master beekeepers. The Beekeeper's Handbook right here, Diana Samataro and Alfonso Vitabel, is one of my favorite books. OSU uses it as well. It's just a great resource all around. I reference it all the time. Periodicals, I really only get 2 of them. I usually have a couple of excess magazines that are available just for free for anyone who's interested over in the beekeeping department. American Bee Journal and Bee Culture, both really great reads, good to keep up to date on what's going on in the beekeeping world. Local beekeeping associations, depending on where you live, pick the one that's closer to you. Oregon State Beekeepers Association is the big state one, so you may be a part of Oregon State and one of your local beekeeping associations too. Lynn Benton Beekeepers Association is right here in Corvallis. They meet at the Waldorf School every third Wednesday. Really great group of people. They've got awesome speakers. Dewey Caron comes once a year to do the Pacific Honeybee Loss Survey. I will do talks on pollinator plants, residential beekeeping, that sort of thing too. So really great group of people. There are club libraries, lots of different books you can check out for free. They do have free extractor rentals for members as well. So definitely reach out, join your peers, ask a bunch of questions. The more questions you ask, the more happy they're going to be. So that's just beekeepers for you.
Do you recommend joining where the bees are or where you?
Join the Beekeepers Association that's closest to probably where you live, because it's more convenient for you to go back and forth, I would say. But either way, beekeeping is extremely regional. So if you live here, you have your bees on the coast, joining a coastal beekeepers association could be handy, because the just the management styles are different on the coast versus inland. So Lynn Benton Beekeepers Association is just the one here in Corvallis. So definitely give them a shout out. It's easiest, honestly, just to show up at one of their meetings and go, hey, I want to become a member. Here's my dues. Their website is great, but there's a whole lot on their website. So easier just to pop in and say hi. So I think that is pretty much going to, oh, what time does the group meet? Question in chat. So Lynn Benton Beekeeping Association meets at 6:30 every third Wednesday. And I think that basically wraps up the talk.
When do we meet again here?
We can meet again here. I'm here every day except for Mondays and Tuesdays, so you can always reach me at the store for any kind of questions.
For a class.
Oh yeah, we do have several upcoming classes, and you can find them over on Register For.
Okay,
Or on our website. We've always got them pre-posted.
okay, very good.
Does anyone have any questions? Filled up everybody's brain a little bit too much today. Definitely overwhelming. So if you want to give this another watch, it's going to be posted on YouTube probably later this week.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thanks everyone for joining.